Hello, my name is Mark Pennington, and I am one of the founders of Insights. But I'm also an MSP owner based in the UK and have been for the last 20 years. So I've got a really good understanding of this industry, what makes it tick, and certainly where the direction is. So I'm hoping today I'm here to be able to present you some best practice suggestions for the use of Insights and how to maximize the value that you get out of this product. If you're watching this video, it's likely that you have either taken up the trial and you're just in the process of just getting used to the features and understanding how it works. Or you may have been using Insights for a little bit and you may want to come back and just have a look at how you can get even more value out of it than you currently are. So we'll dive straight into it, but I'll cover the key topics that we're going to be discussing in this presentation as follows. So the first thing we want to cover is having a look at some process and documentation. How can we incorporate it as part of your ticket handling and escalation procedure? We'll have a look at some KPIs, make some suggestions on what we think might be good KPIs in order to leverage this tool as best as it can. We'll go into details about that. We'll have a look at some accountability and adoption. How can you ensure that your team are using it and using it to its potential? And then finally, what we'll do is we'll summarize and give you some really clear, easy next steps on what you can do to start really leveraging this tool to the max effectively. So we're going to dive straight in and have a look at some process and documentation. So when looking at process documentation, we really focus on the ticket handling process. So how do your engineers at the moment work on tickets to make sure that they get to a resolution as quickly and as effectively as possible? So if we take this example, a typical escalation process is pretty straightforward for the majority of MSPs. This is a really cut down version. So obviously you may have more defined one than this. You might not have one at all. But typically what will happen is a ticket will get raised. The engineer will try and fix it themselves. If they can't, they'll have a look at some documentation, if you've got any documentation defined. If that's been fixed, then great, they'll write the notes and they'll update the client. If they can't really resolve it from their own knowledge or through the documentation that's held within your documentation system, then they'll probably seek some assistance from maybe a more senior or experienced engineer as part of your team. Hopefully that fixes it, and if that doesn't, they'll escalate it to a more experienced team. So typically that's what you'd kind of see in a really cut down version of a ticket handling process. What we would be looking at doing when implementing Insights within a ticket handling procedure is adding a few more steps in there. And the idea of these steps is really to aid those engineers in self-serving before they draw on more experienced engineers and before they escalate it to more experienced engineers as well. So what will typically happen in a scenario where you're leveraging Insights as part of that escalation process, again, a ticket will be raised, and again, the engineer will try and resolve this ticket themselves. If they can't do it out through their own knowledge, they'll then look at related tickets that are being suggested to them. Are there any fixes? If the ticket's been raised, you've probably fixed it multiple times before, probably for that customer, maybe even for that user. So allowing the engineer to really simply find those related tickets and really mine the information out of those tickets. Is there a resolution in that? And again, if that's been fixed, a great update the notes and update the client. If that hasn't worked, so you can't find related tickets that sort of help and aid in resolving the ticket, then you go to suggested fixes. And again, that is you're going a bit further beyond maybe the data that's held within your ConnectWise instance, going a bit out into the internet and actually saying how, from the information we have on this ticket, how would the AI solution aid and help solve that. And again, it's just a prompt. If they've run out of their own ideas, the idea of this is, can we nudge them in a different direction? Can we train them through related tickets and through suggested fixes on how to self-serve and resolve those tickets quickly before drawing on any additional resources? And again, if they are not able to fix at that point, again, we would then encourage to seek that peer assistance within that team, or it could be vendor assistance if it's a particular issue with a product. And again, that ability for that engineer to learn from the peer or from the vendor to improve their skills will just build their experience and allow them to solve it next time. And again, if they're not able to fix it after that, then again, they summarize a ticket, what have they done, and they escalate it to the escalated teams. So if we were to expand that out into a more structured approach, Here's an example of still a relatively simple escalation process. This is in fact the structure, or the loose structure, of the one that I use within my MSP in the UK. So we're fairly straightforward. We have two teams. We have a level 1 team and an escalated team. We like to keep it simple like that. And how we've then incorporated it as part of our escalation process is a level 1 engineer will come along. They'll set the ticket to working issue now. They'll spend 15 minutes trying to solve it themselves, and again, if they've resolved it, they set it to resolve, and they'll notify the clients. Brilliant. That's all you need. You do not need insights in those instances. You don't need insights for password resets or straightforward processes like that, because obviously the engineer should probably know how to do that, unless they're obviously very new. But if from their own knowledge they're not able to do that, again, they'll spend 15 minutes viewing related tickets, looking at internal documentations. We'll signpost them to those resources, and with the aid of can they resolve it in the next 15 minutes. If they can't, again, then they go to the suggested fixes and they document what they've done, spend another 15 minutes on that. If they've not done that, if that's not resolved it, then again we go to that peer review, vendor support, spend another 15 minutes on that, and again, if that's not resolved it, they summarize, update the notes, and then they escalate it to the escalated team. So that is really a simple way of incorporating insights as part of your process. Now, the reason we're highlighting this is if you implement insights and you don't incorporate it as part of your escalation process, you'll find later on that adoption and the usage of it can be patchy. You'll get some engineers which are early adopters, really thrive on this type of technology, and you get some engineers which are have their ways of doing things. They will still go to Google and Google solutions, even though you have significant amount of data within your ConnectWise instance, even though suggested fixes are probably telling them exactly the steps on how to resolve this ticket. They'll still go and spend time doing that, and that's where you save the time. It's reducing the need for the engineer to go and look for information because it's being presented to them, and that's self-serve, and you're also saving the time of the more experienced engineers. So we'll talk about the escalator team a little bit later in this presentation, but this document will form, you'll be able to download this as well and have a copy of that to have a look at how you might be able to incorporate it as part of your ticket handling process as well. Perfect. So documentation, and we'll go into the KPIs. So KPIs are critically important. It's really important to know what you're measuring, what does success look like, where are you starting from, and where you're trying to get to. And with KPIs, there's always a few key principles with that. Less is more. I think we've probably all had experiences where we've had KPI scorecards or dashboards which has got 20 or 30 KPIs on it, and it just becomes white noise. So it's always recommended to keep it really limited to 3, maybe 4 KPIs, just to really focus on what you're trying to achieve. Once you're achieving them, then actually change them out and put some new KPIs in there for that. So some of the suggestions that we would recommend, and again, you need to be aware of what really your organization needs, what your customers need, because not all MSPs or technology support organizations are the same. You may have more a generalist support where you're providing a wide range of sectors and customer sizes, and you're covering a lot of different support requirements, or your organization might be in a narrow vertical covering only really a small amount of solutions, and because of that you're going to have a mixture, or you're going to have differing levels of what's acceptable for some KPIs. So the KPIs I'm recommending are sort of just a little bit leaning more towards a generalist, but so tweak as you need to. So the first KPI that we would sort of recommend is the first time fix. And again, when looking at customer satisfaction, the key metric when looking at whether a customer is satisfied with the service that we provide or within our industry, it tends to be first time fix. They want it fixed quickly, they want it hassle free, they don't want to re-raise tickets, and what we aim for within our practice is higher than 65%. Is really what is where we want to get to. Again, you kind of need to know where your baseline is, and then you need to sort of work your way to that. If you've got a really skilled team and again, you're providing a narrow focus, your first time fixes might be higher. So again, just understanding what you feel is unacceptable for your organization and apply it to that. Ticket escalation. So again, the goal of Insights is really to free up your escalations team or your second or third line team, however you've got it structured within your organization. Reduce the number of tickets, get them knocked out the park straight away, and really freeing up your more expensive and valuable resources at that level. And that allows you to actually build out your level 1 team, which is probably your quicker response team as well. So measuring how many tickets are getting escalated is really important. So again, we aim for less than 20% of tickets get escalated. So 80% of tickets are solved at first line within our organization. This one we particularly like, and this is really good when speaking to clients, especially as part of a QPR process, is the average time to resolution on our level 1 tickets. Because we aim for 80% of our tickets to be solved at level 1, we then measure how, on average, how quickly our tickets from the point of being created to the point of being completed or resolved does it take. And again, this is very variable, but for us, we aim on average of about 2 hours. And that's a really good metric to make sure you're solving things quickly. And again, it's a good indicator of first time fix. Doesn't always reference that, but it's really good on average. If you're closing tickets within 2 hours, we feel that provides a really good customer service. And again, bring it up as part of your QBR meetings. On average, you're solving tickets in less than 2 hours from the point of being raised. It's quite a powerful message we found from our experience. And then finally, slightly covered by my face, unfortunately, so sorry about that. It's the reopen rate. And again, it's just ensuring that tickets that get closed stay closed. If the thing about KPIs, if you start driving KPIs and they're not driven in a healthy way sometimes. So if you're driving for first time fix and engineers are closing tickets off, classic it's first time fix, but they're being reopened because they're not being fixed properly, measuring the reopen rate is quite important. So again, we aim for a 2%, less than 2% reopen rate on tickets. So those are some KPI suggestions. You may have your own. It's really about understanding what your customer needs, but also if you're aiming for, really getting those tickets nailed at level 1 and getting it done quickly and avoiding those escalations, some of these KPIs here we feel might be valuable for yourselves. Perfect. And going back to the best practice in terms of how to handle KPIs. So here's an example scorecard. We use BrightGauge, which a lot of you will use. You may have some other dashboarding software that you use instead. But it is about keeping those KPIs lean. Starting off with 3, 4, 5 maybe, that allows you to really pinpoint your attention and your focus on getting those right. And when you are consistently getting those right and your processes are robust enough that you feel that you can actually not need to measure them on a weekly basis, it's then migrating them to a dashboard and having someone owning on that. So it's always just that purpose of, right, you're bringing a KPI in, you're having a look at it, you're concentrating it for a period of time. That might be a short period of time, that might be going forward for the period, for the rest of the time. But at a point where your KPI is being hit, achieved, and it's easy to do, is then moving it onto a dashboard and getting that managed by someone within that service delivery department or that function to own that dashboard. And then if there's a problem, if it starts becoming a problem, again, you elevate it as part of that scorecard. So, and again, you just keep changing those KPIs as and when needed. Perfect. So accountability and adoption. So one of the hardest parts of this, and this is why we're coming to it last, because accountability and adoption cannot be achieved if you don't put the foundational elements in as part of that. So what are some of the things that you need to put in? So you've had a look at your process documentation, you've had a look at your KPIs, and you understand what that looks like. Well, the first thing you'll need to do in terms of the accountability and adoption is training. If you've got new processes, got new KPIs, it's really providing them the knowledge of how to do it. If you don't give them any training on how to use this tool or how to actually make sure that you're achieving the KPIs that you set, you're not going to be successful with doing this. So it's really training your team and repeating that as well. And again, as part of your onboarding of new engineers, when they're getting up to speed, is obviously training them as part of that onboarding process as well. So the next one that we found is that peer accountability. So within the scenarios that we're talking about, so I mentioned earlier that we'll talk about the escalation team. So we have it within our organization. How can we get accountability to make sure that Insights is used, especially by that level 1 team? And where we have it is every single ticket gets escalated to the escalations team. An escalated engineer, when they get to it, will have a look at that ticket. They'll make sure that the level 1 engineer reviewed and used the tool. They looked at related tickets and they looked at the at the suggested fixes. They documented it, summarized it, put it in the notes. And if that hasn't happened, it gets passed down. And if you implement something like this, it doesn't take more than a few days for the first line engineers to think, right, we need to keep on top of this, because I don't want my peers to keep pushing tickets back to me. So how does that look like? So again, I mentioned before, we'll come back to this diagram. So again, an escalated engineer at this point, when they're working the issue now, will do a verification at that point, and check that. And again, if it's not been done, they'll push it back. They may notify the team lead, depending on how you want to structure that. But they'll push it back directly to the engineer with a note saying you need to go and follow this process. And again, the more disciplined they are at that level, the quicker and the more impact it'll make in terms of actually leveraging this tool, certainly at that level 1 team. Perfect. The next one as well is the trust and verify method. So it's trusting your engineers are doing what you've trained them to do, and your escalated engineers are holding the level 1s to a certain level of accountability when passing tickets up to them. But it's also then the team lead, the manager of that department, whoever is appropriate, is then running random sample and QA checks on those tickets, making sure they're actually being done. And again, the good one that we tend to find in terms of are they leveraging the tools is all escalated tickets should have this insights being shown to be used as part of it. Again, obviously there will be instances of password resets where the engineer should be able to resolve it without using it, but again, that shouldn't have got to the escalated level if they've just solved it themselves. So that's why trust and verify at the escalated ticket level is quite a good place to have a look at it, from our experience. And finally, again, slightly covered, so apologies for that, but the individual KPIs. So setting up individual KPIs aligned to your department KPIs is always very powerful as well. Consider gamifying it. If you don't already, putting leader scoreboards up on wall boards is very powerful. Again, less is more. And also, not only if you bringing awareness to those KPIs tends to sharpen their focus. So what gets measured, what gets measured gets managed. It will really allow you to identify where you may have additional training requirements. So if you've got an engineer which is escalating more than 20% of their tickets, their average resolution at L1 is more than 2 hours, where the rest of the team is under 2 hours. You can easily identify people that may need additional support and training in those particular areas. So it's really powerful if you can get the right KPIs in place at an individual level to really hone where people need more support than maybe others. So that's really helpful for some accountability and adoption. So in summary, where do you go from here? So there's some useful information in terms of best practice ideas and how to leverage things out of and leverage more and maximize the value out of insights. But what would we recommend you do next? So the first thing we'll do is review your processes and update them. If insights doesn't form part of your escalation and ticket handling process, you'll find it very difficult to hold accountability as part of that. It'll always just be a bolt-on module onto the side, which some engineers will lean more into than others. So putting this process in place, defining what those steps looks like, really will garner that buy-in from that team. Defining those 3 or 4 KPIs, again, we've recommended some there. Need to have a look at what you're currently reporting. They may be appropriate already, or you may want to tweak them. But just have a look at that. Make sure you're comfortable with them. If you've got too many, I would recommend reducing them down to a few and changing them out once they're working. Set up your peer and KPI accountability and monitoring. So a lot of this is your trust and verify, it is your peer accountability. It's speaking to your teams if you have one-to-one meetings, if you have team meetings, however you've got that structured, just make sure you factor it in as part of your cadence with your team, so they know how they're performing and how they're dealing with the tools, and as well as the general performance overall. Again, train your team. So once you've got all of this structured, once you've got your process, KPIs, accountability, cadence in there, tell your team about it. Make sure they're aware. Make sure they're on board. Get them involved in defining it if that's appropriate. But yeah, really make sure you train your team, train your new people, and remind them. And if you do identify individual engineers which might not be firing to the level of others, retrain them again. Give them that chance. And then finally, it's just start getting more success, get leverage more out of insights. We believe it brings a huge amount of value. It certainly does for us, certainly does for a lot of the MSPs we speak to. So we're hoping that implementing some of these best practice changes will certainly elevate this to a really good level for you. So obviously we've got this best practice video, so that allows you to go off and do all of those implementations, and hopefully that gives you enough information to go off and do that. But if you did want some assistance from us, we are certainly here available to help with that. And just for full transparency, we do offer a fixed price onboarding, and that is effectively, in the UK it's 2,000 plus VAT, in the US it's 2,600, and Australia and New Zealand that'll be 3,900 for that. And what do you get in that? You effectively get you'll get an initial review call, just having a look at what you've got in place at the moment. We'll then assist in the development of your processes. It's still going to be heavily led by yourselves, but we'll certainly be able to get involved, make pointers, help guide that process and implementing that, help define your KPIs, accountability reporting, give you guidance on how to structure the KPIs if that's something you're not quite sure how to do. We can assist in the training of your team. We can be involved in that. It could be led by you. We can assist in training it, just to give our expertise and advice on that as well. We'll do some follow-up calls, normally about 6 weeks after installation, just to make sure all is okay. Plus, we'll do any additional meetings and calls as needed, within reason. Within that, we do want to fix price it, just so it's all clear and understanding, and we don't want to just, some MSPs need a little bit more support than others. Absolutely fine. We're here just to make sure you get the best value out of it. So that is. And if you want to speak to us about that, please reach out to us, and we'll certainly give you some more information about that. Thank you. Hopefully you found some of the information in this video useful and presentation useful. If you've got any questions, any information, please let me know, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can to your questions. So thank you very much for your time.